Jake Wightman is a British middle distance runner who primarily competes in the 1500 metres. He won gold at the 2022 World Championships, the first global gold medal in a middle distance event for a British male since Seb Coe's 1500 metre title at the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics. He holds 3 Scottish records and is a 2-time British champion. He's currently focusing all of his attentions on Paris in the Olympics this year. Jake, how on earth does somebody who doesn't really love running end up doing what you do to the level that you're doing it?
I don't enjoy the act of just going for a run. Like for me, there's a lot, especially when I retire, there'll be a lot of other ways I can keep fit. So what's going to make you stand out? It's what you do on that race. So it's being the best decision maker you can possibly be.
How hard has it been to sort of get back to that winning ways mentality and know that you're where you need to be mentally as well as physically?
If I could bottle that instant moment when you cross the line and it's happened up, that is the biggest high that I've had and probably ever will have.
And that is why, my friend, you are contesting Paris and the rest of us are not. Okay, Jake, for the purposes of people who are listening to this podcast and not watching it on YouTube, I'm just going to sort of stand up and show you my top, which I put on this morning, and I cannot possibly be as organised as I have been to be wearing this top. But look what it reads. It says the word Paris on it. And I promise you I didn't do that knowing that we were going to speak later on this afternoon. But by happenstance, it has occurred in my favour that I have a top reading Paris on it. So, well, let's start there. How are you going to go about winning it?
That's straight to the point. So for me, this would be my second Olympic Games, and having won a world title already, the only thing I have to do is do the same thing again against the same people again and forget that there's an Olympic Games on the line and assume it's just like any other season. That's probably the main thing, is to try and not put too much pressure on.
Okay, hang on a minute. Let's just go back. The only thing you have to do. I mean, as an athlete, can you compartmentalise in that way where you're able to switch off everything around that? Because the pressure alone, the stress of it, all the things that sort of compound before an Olympics, that must play a part, right?
Yeah, there's one thing that probably derailed my Tokyo Olympics a little bit, was that it was like the Olympic Games. I was like, this is like the biggest moment in my career. It only happens normally every 4 years, but we happened to wait 5 years for this one to come around for Tokyo. And I think afterwards, in hindsight, I was like, what was I doing? It's like I've run 1500 meters so many times. I've had a good season. I'm able to perform my best when it matters. But for some reason, when I put the Olympic Games label on it, it just became way too big a deal. I kind of just intensified everything, which it doesn't need to be. For me, it's like, it's against the same 11 other people you'd run against a lot of the time in the seasons. And it's in a stadium that hopefully is full. And we're lucky to ran in front of full stadiums before. The only thing is that there's like a very nice title on the line compared to other years, which I guess you kind of think about that when it's done. And beforehand, the more you kind of make it a big deal, the more likely you're probably going to implode and kind of panic a little bit about it.
So what tactics do you employ to make sure it doesn't become a big deal? Because let's face it, the media is going to go bananas. The category of the 1500 metres is highly contested and got some great names in the mix. So how are you going to stop the noise?
A lot of it is just taking a step at a time. There's no way you can look all the way to July at the moment. For me, I've come off a year where I've had the worst year I've had with injuries and just not being able to compete and my body not being kind of as responsive as I hoped it to be. So at the moment, for me, it's like just being better every single week than I have been. And everyone is a step closer towards that Paris final. But I can't look beyond my training camp in the spring because I need to do the work there to make sure that I'm ready to race when I get back. I can't look beyond my first couple of races because I need to run a standard to be able to tick that off. And then the next month we've got trials. So everything is a stepping stone along the way. So you have to kind of like build the layers to the cake. You can't just go and ice it straight away by thinking about that Olympic final and assume that that's going to come, because there's a lot of work that has to happen before then that I know that I have to be kind of blinkered towards that first before I can reap the rewards of it, I guess.
I mean, it's probably every kid's dream to win an Olympic Games, isn't it? I mean, before they discover whether they're any good or not at what said sport they want to compete in. But, you know, was this always your dream growing up? Was this always the thing that you wanted to do, is stand on that podium in the top spot?
I think as a real little kid, if I was good enough at football, I'd have probably loved to have been doing that. But sadly, I wasn't blessed with enough footballing ability. But yeah, my mum and dad were both professional athletes, so they both worked in the sport. My mum was a coach at my school within athletics and a PE teacher at my school. And then my dad worked within governing bodies of athletics. So we were lucky that we were taken to watch it from a very young age. And for me, like the people I looked up to the most from about the age of 8 was athletes and runners. So we got to meet them, got an autograph book at home that has people that I went on to compete against. And I'd say from the age of 8, I would love to have done this. And I remember saying probably at the age of like 14, 15, I would love to just get a GB vest and be able to say that I ran for my country. And then throughout the sport, your kind of ambitions change. And yeah, you forget that the little kid at 8 to be able to say that they've gone to Olympic Games is one thing, but a real dream is obviously winning Olympic gold. And to be able to see that as a possibility is pretty exciting. But again, something that I've got to keep a bit of a lid on until that moment comes.
Were you always super competitive with your twin, Sam? It feels like if you've got a twin and you're competitive, that can only end in total disaster. I mean, how did that sort of manifest itself with you two as you were growing up?
Yeah, honestly, like I was a shocker, I think, as a kid for that, where the biggest thing, I had like a fear almost of losing to my brother. And like, I didn't mind if it was something like we had our kind of things that we'd be best at. So Sam was always better swimmer. He was a better like sprinter than me, much better in school than me. Whereas like my thing was when it came to like cross country or like middle distance races, like I had to beat him and I had to beat him by as much as I could. And there was a couple of occasions where he definitely could have and he would never come past. And it was about sort of like 15 that I knew I'd broken him and he just wasn't as bothered as me, which is sad, isn't it? And I've told the story before, but it came to the point where when he was running pretty well, I was very worried in these little cross-country leagues we'd have once a week. And I was like, oh, he's going to beat me tomorrow. Like, he's running well and I don't feel great. So I hid his spikes the night before. So I went into the like garage where I know it's shocking, isn't it? Where our school bags were. And I took his spikes out and I hid them. And then I felt so guilty for it that when I woke up in the morning, I went and put them back. And I did beat him just, but I look back on that and I think, what a little brat. Like, what was I doing? But on the other hand of it, so he went to drama school and he's now an actor, but we had a school play and there was like the 12 days of Christmas. So the biggest part was, is it the partridge in a pear tree all the way down to the 12. And I was one of the 12. And then Sam was a calling bird, which is 4 of them. And he got asked, does Jake want to be a calling bird? And Sam said, no, he doesn't. They didn't offer me the part. So I think we've both given as good as we've got over the years.
I'm glad it only manifested itself in stuff like spikes being hidden from him and who was going to be a partridge in a pear tree. That's as innocent as it gets, which is fantastic. But one thing it does definitely point to is this highly competitive streak in you, and the fact that at some point in a kid's adolescence, there's a moment where you can go right or you can go left. And clearly you decided, where most people go left and just say, oh, I'm just happy to be good at this stuff. You actually knew that you wanted to pursue it professionally. Was there a moment where you said, this is what I want my career to be?
I think I've always held on to the belief that it could be. And I wasn't a great kid, like in the sport. Like I would be happy to make, so we grew up in Edinburgh, and I'd be happy to make like a Scottish schools final or get like a regional vest. And for me, that was success. And then I always believed that I was a bit smaller and like grew a little bit later, but my time would come. And my parents were saying, they were like, oh, that the bigger boys, they're just a bit further on in their development, but you'll catch them up and you'll be doing as well as you hope to. And I always kind of held on to that. So I don't think that many people when I was 15 would have said that I could go on to have a career in it. Whereas I always felt as though there was just the possibility of that. And I think it was when I was at university, I won European Juniors, which was the first time that brands approached me and I got a contract and I got put on funding. And then from then I was like, well, I can make this a living now. And you kind of have to remind yourself that I'm doing a hobby for a job in theory. And there's a lot of people that do this not getting paid a thing. So for me to be able to do what I was doing as a kid for free because I just completely enjoyed it, wanted to race, like loved the sport, the fact that I can now earn a living from it and I have done for the last over 10 years or so is like something pretty special.
But I'm interested to know what happened on that journey, which sort of changed things up. Because like you say, you weren't necessarily winning everything, but you were competitive. And then suddenly things did start to change. Was it How much of that was mental strength over physical strength, or how much was the diligence in training, paying attention to your nutrition, your coaching schedule? Like, what do you think happened to turn you from a kind of a journeyman in the sport to a winner?
So my dad's been my coach since I was, I think, probably 14 years old. And he always installed in me that if you're going to stand on the start line of a race, you're going to try and win it. So whether or not you're the one beforehand that everyone would say, oh, he's going to win, which a lot of the time it wasn't. And throughout my career, there's always been occasions where I've surprised people from that. So I would do something to have an impact on a race that gave me a chance of winning. And that kind of gamble meant a lot of instances I ran terribly and worse than I would have. But then the occasion where it went better than expected was where I really took a step forward. And I was like, Christ, I've done this. Like, therefore, this is the level I should be operating at. And then you just keep making those sort of jumps. So I've done it on several occasions where I'm just taking the opportunities that have come. And that's like massive for me. And the mindset of it, I had to at a young age, like separate myself from being the age that I was. So at university, I was on a contract, like I was saying, from 19, and I was living with my friends who they ran, but they were part of like the big social scene at uni. People going out a lot, and I had to make a conscious decision. I was like, somebody's now putting their trust in me. They're giving me a bit of money. They're giving me kit. Therefore, if they believe that I'm worth that, then I have to value myself in that, and I have to separate myself from this sort of lifestyle. So university was tough. Like, I missed out on holidays, I missed out on like birthdays and stuff like that, and it's always been worth it for me. But in the moment at the time, it was like, geez, like if I don't end up going as far as I want with this, then I'll look back on these and people will be like, what did you do for your 21st? I'll be like, oh, I sat in a hotel room before a race. And I look at stuff like that, and it's all worth it now. But at the time, those are hard decisions for a 19, 20-year-old like kid, which I still probably was at that point. But it was part of the sacrifice that long term was going to get me the point which I dreamed of as a kid, which, yeah, I'm very grateful that I made the right choice and had the right people give me the right advice to make them as well.
And that is why, my friend, you are contesting Paris and the rest of us are not. Let's just focus on your dad, though, because what an incredible moment that was in 2022 when you won the World Championship title and he called the race. I mean, the rest of us just think that must have been the most staggering moment. But for you, it was quite normal, right? Because that's something that he'd done a lot of times previously.
There's been, I couldn't even count how many times my dad has been on the mic for my races now, but he used to do my school sports days. So in 2012, he did my school sports day, which he probably thought was the pinnacle of that summer. But then he went on to do the London Olympics a few months later. So even within Scotland, he would do like I like cross country races, and then he'd go on to do like the big race in the summer. But there's been so many occasions where, especially when I was coming through, where I've been so far near the back that even though he's been calling the race, he's had to speak to me after and be like, oh, like, how did you do? Because he just hadn't seen me because I was that far back. So I think it was a long time coming for him to actually have a race like that where he was calling me as a winner, and he has the choice not to do them. So they asked him from quite a long time ago when I made, I think, probably my first world champs when I was a bit younger, but they said, oh, like, we know you might want to watch the 1500 or you might not want to do the announcing for it, so we'll give it to somebody else. He was like, no, he wants to do it because I think he loves the fact that he could be part of something pretty special. And we went for a lot of periods to a lot of champs to get to that point, but I don't think there's many situations probably in sport where there's been a father or a mother that has commentated or like announced their own kid being able to do something like that. So for my family as a whole, it's like a pretty special moment to look back on.
What would it mean to you if he was able to do that in Paris?
I'm actually not sure if he's doing it in Paris. So that's what's sad, is like that's probably the only time that may happen. But it's the thing with Paris is that it wouldn't be probably the same emotion, because I think the shock of winning in Eugene and the world title for me was the biggest thing, both for me and him. It was like we hoped that could have happened, and it was like a possibility, but I never once was like set in that being the outcome. I was like, there's an opportunity here to become world champion, but I don't know for sure that's going to happen. Whereas this one, I've done that before. So going into Paris, it's like I know that I can do it. So therefore, the shock value probably won't be as high if I was able to do it. Like, don't get me wrong, it'd be amazing still. But I just think that period was probably the best for both of us, because it was like, I can't believe that he's actually gone and done this. So I'll treasure that, and I hope if you asked him what's the best thing he's ever commentated on, he'd say that. But he loved Super Saturday when it was Mo, Jess and Greg. So honestly, I think that it'd be pretty close between those two moments.
What was it like in the immediate aftermath after winning something that you're not sure whether it's going to come good or not? What's that feeling like when you surprise yourself as well as other people, and you take them and you on that journey? What must that have felt like?
And that's I've said to people before, where like, if I could bottle that instant moment when you cross the line and it's happened up, that is the like biggest high that I've had and probably ever will have. And from then the realization sets in, and you don't feel like as ecstatic as that very, very first moment where it's just like, what have I gone and done here? And I just love the fact that it meant a lot to a lot of other people. Like, that's one thing, yourself having that emotion and feeling absolutely buzzing at how you've done. But I saw my sponsors, my agent, my family after, and every single one of them was just like blown away by it, which that was special for me, because I was like, if I can have an impact like that. And one of the first things I saw, so I didn't have my phone until I went into anti-doping, which that is a massive come down. You go on this like huge high, like huge moment, and then you sat in a room waiting to go to the toilet with, I think it was just the head of endurance was with me, and then a drug tester. And I had my phone, and I saw it was a WhatsApp group with my like uni mates. So like there's like, I don't know, 12 people on there, and they were going mental. And I read that, and I was like, that's special, seeing like how mad they've reacted to it at the equivalent of 3 a.m. it was at that point in the UK, and they've stayed up to watch it, and they're like celebrating that moment as much as I am. They're the moments that feel real special.
You talk about the highest of highs and then the sort of mundanity of going through the drug testing process afterwards. What about the highest of highs followed by the lowest of lows? Because after that amazing victory and everything that came after it, that comes this injury, which I suppose for every athlete is just the ultimate nightmare, because an athletic career is not necessarily the longest. And so what does that feel like? What happened? How did it happen? And how did you sort of deal with that in the immediate aftermath?